The Pokemon market continues to boom with the Scarlet and Violet era leading the way. Sword and Shield era is not too far behind, so for today we're going to compare the top 5 cards from the Sword and Shield era as well as the Scarlet and Violet era from a price perspective as well as the card design, at least from my perspective, and give an ultimate rating on which series is better. We'll also be looking at the top sets from these two eras as well as the pull rates from them to help us make a better decision on which era takes the #1 spot, at least for now. Let's dive in. So we're going to be using Pokedata today to start off by looking at some of our cards, and we'll also be looking at TCG Player to look at what the pull rates are for some of these sets. So here we go. We're going to start off with the #5 card from the Scarlet and Violet era. Then we'll look at what the #5 card is from the Sword and Shield era. So the #5 card from the Scarlet and Violet era is Mew EX, currently going for $390, and a PSA 10 pulling a $986 ticket. This is amazing. This card, honestly, is a beautiful card, Mew EX. I honestly did not pull this card, and I wish I did, because now it's, nor did I buy it, and I wish I did because now it's like quadrupled in price. Looking at the design, it's a beautiful card. Mew just hanging out there, shiny Mew at the end of the day because he is blue, and he's just hanging out there, and having the other Pokemon in the background is really cool with Diglett, Oddish. It's a great concept. It gives you that same vibe as the Evolving Skies cards did with some of the, for example, the Glaceon or the Umbreon. This one is the #1 card from Paldean Fates currently, was #2 for quite some time, but did take over that spot. Mew is the #5 card, going for $390 from the Scarlet and Violet era. And the #5 card from the Sword and Shield era is Leafeon VMAX. So Leafeon VMAX over here is currently going for $438, so slightly higher than the Mew EX when you look at the two of them, about $30 to $40 or so. But the PSA 10 is only going for $606. So the Mew EX peeps out the PSA 10 by almost $400, which is really insane. Leafeon VMAX has a really nice art to it as well, hanging out there, farmlands, just doing its thing. If you want my honest opinion between the Leafeon and the Mew, and this is what it's going to come down to, I'm going to give it a 1 and 2 position. I'm going to rank the two of them between each other. Mew EX is a better card than Leafeon VMAX. Although one thing I do want to mention, pulling a Leafeon VMAX is much more difficult than it is the Mew EX. But in my opinion, based on the artwork, which is what I'm basing it off of, because the price is not that different with the exception of the PSA 10, I believe the Mew EX takes the W between the two of them. It's 1-0 Scarlet and Violet right now. Next up is Espeon EX from Prismatic Evolutions. This is the #4 card from the Scarlet and Violet era. It's a decent card. I don't think it's my favorite card. A PSA 10 is going for $1637, raw for $416. Prismatic Evolutions, obviously, there's a lot of hype around it. A lot of its cards are really up there in price, and they came down a little bit. Espeon EX right now is the #4 card from the Sword and Shield era. And looking at the #4 card from the Scarlet and Violet era, it is Giratina V from Lost Origin, taking a $708 price ticket. PSA 10 going for $1,512. So the PSA 10 prices are very similar. The raw copy, however, for Giratina V is much higher than the Espeon, which is almost double the price of what we saw from the Espeon EX. Giratina V, honestly, is a really nice card. A lot of people want it. There's a lot of hype around it. Very difficult to pull. If I have to take one card between Espeon EX and Giratina V, it would be Giratina V that takes the W here. And the reason is just it's a really nice card. And, you know, honestly, I've been trying to pull it myself and I never had. And it's just a better artwork, honestly, than the Prismatic Evolutions Espeon EX. And I don't want to rip on Prismatic Evolutions, but they're all more or less the same thing, the exception of maybe the Umbreon. Just some random patterns, and that's about it. Here you've got Giratina in like some really crazy place. It looks like some sort of theme park, in my honest opinion, but it looks much cooler than the Espeon EX. And the price technically is higher from a raw perspective, as the PSA 10 prices are more or less the same. So Giratina V, for me, is the more superior card between the two of them, making it Sword and Shield 1, Scarlet and Violet era 1. And the #3 card, starting off with Scarlet and Violet era, is Pikachu. And Pikachu is a $454 card. Difficult to pull, 1 in 1,000 approximately is the pull rate with this one. PSA 10 going for $1,035. Very nice card. It's great to see a Pikachu card doing some damage in the Scarlet and Violet era. And honestly, it's a nice card. It's a nice card and it's grown on me. I didn't really like it at the beginning, but now as time passed, I started to like it a lot more. And looking at the number 3 card from the Sword and Shield era, it is Gengar VMAX, which is quite a competitor, going for $725. PSA 10 also more expensive than the Pikachu, $1,457. It is honestly a very difficult one for me because I like both of these Pokemon and both of these artworks are really nice. But in all honesty, the Gengar VMAX from Fusion Strike has to take the next spot here for me. And it's honestly because the artwork is just slightly better. It's there just doing his thing, just doing his G-Max swallow up, Moon in the background, very difficult card to pull as well. And it's technically more expensive than the Pikachu from both a raw as well as PSA 10 perspective. So Gengar VMAX takes the W here, making it 2-1 to the Sword and Shield era. Next up, taking the number 2 spot from the Scarlet and Violet era is Sylveon EX. Sylveon EX, beautiful card, currently going for $501 raw, and the PSA 10 goes for $1,660. From the Scarlet and Violet era, we have the Rayquaza VMAX, another huge competitor, going for $751 for a raw copy, and the PSA 10 goes for $1,034. So a lot less than what the Sylveon is going for, which was approximately around $1,600 from when we looked at it just now. So this one is a hard one to call because in my honest opinion, Rayquaza was the first alternate art that I pulled from Evolving Skies. And I actually sent it out to get graded, and I got a PSA 10. So I have a lot of connection to this Rayquaza, even though the Sylveon is really nice. For me, I think the Rayquaza will peep out the Sylveon EX and take that W, making it 3-1 to the Sword and Shield era. I know it's starting to become a landslide victory for the Sword and Shield era. And again, this is just my opinion for all of you guys. I'm comparing the top 5, seeing which ones are better for me. Maybe it might not be the case for you, but so far, even with the prices, with the exception of the Sylveon and the Rayquaza, the Sword and Shield era still is a little bit more expensive for these raw cards, as well as the graded versions. And the number 1 card from the Scarlet and Violet era is Umbreon EX. This one is going to be an obvious battle between Umbreon and Umbreon, going for $1,580 as per TCG Player for the raw copy of the Umbreon EX from Prismatic Evolutions, and the PSA 10 is going for $4,025. So right out the gate, really up there. Now looking at the Moonbreon, we are at $1,767 for a raw copy, and a PSA 10 is only $2,661. Insane. This one is a difficult one, but if we look at some other factors such as the pull rates, Prismatic Evolutions, for a specific SIR, we're looking at 1 in 1440, and if we were to look at Evolving Skies, it's 1 in almost 2,000 for a specific alternate art. So to pull Moonbreon over, if you want to call it Sunbreon, it's more difficult to pull the Moonbreon. It is what it is. The data is there, and for me, I'm not going to use that as the only factor. I genuinely like the Moonbreon more than the new Umbreon card that has come out. So for me, the Moonbreon still takes it, even though technically the price of the Moonbreon is a little bit less from a PSA 10 perspective. I do still think that this new Umbreon EX is a little bit overpriced. It might come down a little bit more as we see the set in general for Prismatic Evolutions has gone down since it first came out. I believe it was around 10,000. We're going to look at what that price point is in a moment here. So with Moonbreon winning that battle, it is now Sword and Shield Era 4 and Scarlet and Violet Era 1. The Sword and Shield Era, in my opinion, is still a better era than the Scarlet and Violet era. However, the Scarlet and Violet era is making some big moves, and at one point, I still feel that it may actually take over the Sword and Shield era. And to just look at one other data point here, if we look at Prismatic Evolutions, the total value of the set is now $7,800. At one point, this was over a $10,000 set, so we have seen it drop in price a little bit here, but still a very expensive one, the most expensive one from the Scarlet and Violet era, and I believe it peeps out the majority, if not all, of the Sword and Shield era. If we look at Evolving Skies is at $5,700, meaning that the Prismatic Evolution set overall is actually worth more than Evolving Skies. Now, that being said, we have to look at the total card count here. There is about 400 cards in Prismatic Evolutions, where there's only 335 in Evolving Skies. That being said, Prismatic Evolutions is a very new set, and it's already $2,000, almost 50% more expensive than what Evolving Skies is, and Evolving Skies was not Evolving Skies when it first came out. It was nowhere near that price point. So the point I'm trying to make here is that The Scarlet and Violet era are making big moves at this point, and at one point, I would even say we're close to that point here. It's going to take over and be a more popular era than the Sword and Shield era. I still believe that the Sword and Shield era is number one at this point compared to the two of them. It's only a matter of time when the Scarlet and Violet era takes over. We've got so many illustration rares, special illustration rares. We've got so many beautiful sets to come out. We've got Journey Together, the new Rocket set that's going to come out. It's probably going to make Scarlet and Violet era even more attractive than the Sword and Shield era, so it's only a matter of time. So that's a quick look at what's going on with the Sword and Shield era as well as the Scarlet and Violet era. For me, the Sword and Shield era still takes the number one spot. I believe it's just holding on to those spots with a few of its cards that are really doing well. But if we take a look at some of the other cards in the Scarlet and Violet era, in comparison to the Sword and Shield, a lot of cards are passing that $100 mark, and there are a lot of illustration and special illustration rares that are in the Scarlet and Violet era, which will continue to go up in price. Whereas the alternate art concept in the Sword and Shield era, the alt arts, there aren't as many in comparison to how many illustration rares that is. So I think at one point the Scarlet and Violet era will take over, and I believe it's kind of already starting to do that, but I still feel that the Sword and Shield era is just holding on at this moment. Let me know in the comment section below what your thoughts are on my ranking between the top 5 of both these eras, and if you agree or disagree. And if you guys got this far in the video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. My name's TRV, you guys are the greatest, and we'll see you next time.